We were seen as the perfect family because as kids, we learned to adjust to that environment. And a closely controlling environment, guess what? It makes you very controlled yourself. And children who are self-disciplined, self-sacrificing, delayed gratification, incredibly disciplined, are kids that ace school, they're incredible at sports, they do everything they're told. And actually those kids, that we might all kind of know some of them, those kids sometimes do the things that are good for them against their own will. And actually, we as kids were good at school, but through fear, not through this kind of self-actualization or like the top of some enlightened pyramid. It was genuine fear that we had to succeed because the only future we had was ours, and our Father was doing the best he could to destroy it. So a lot of people don't actually see domestic abuse when it's happening, even when it's incredibly serious. So as kind of part of the community, hopefully from hearing me talk today and kind of discussion afterwards, you'll be much more aware of maybe some of the things to look for. So when someone's trying to understand what's going on, you can help them understand rather than sort of accidentally maybe deny it and then they'll go into that denial that might last forever, unfortunately. So I'll kind of talk about that, but I guess a couple of things that Ryan and I, obviously we share our story, but we don't just share our stories like, this happened, it's a story, and off we go. There's a lot to be learned from our story, and it's not just about domestic abuse, actually. Crime in itself is committed because, often we thought people did crime because they were poor or because they were traumatised or something. Like, we never really understood crime, despite living with a murderer. We never really understood what happened. And from our experiences and from meeting other people, we've realised that crime isn't carried out in the context that we thought it was. Our father was a murderer and we never saw it. And one of the things that's really struck us actually is that people do bad things, not because of emotions or trauma, but because of entitlement. So our father was incredibly nice, as I said, to everyone outside of our family, and was incredibly horrible to his family. That was an act of choice. If he was traumatised in an uncontrollable way, it would have radiated everywhere. And actually that's why we never thought he was dangerous, because he was quite able to control what he was doing in different circumstances. And one of the things that's really important, I think, there is that we have to understand that there's actually a level of, for men, there's a level of male entitlement that we need to recognise that often leads to crime. Most people know that men commit most crimes. Crime is gendered in the most broad sense, as domestic abuse is incredibly gendered. But one of the things that really struck us is when we were telling our story, a lot of people kept mentioning things like adverse childhood experiences, which lead people on to go and commit crime. People kept asking, what was your father's childhood like? What was your father's childhood like? It must have been really bad for him to do this thing. And we were like, well, we don't know. Our father hid most of his past from us, so we thought maybe it's this really elaborate, traumatic past that he had. But actually it wasn't at all. The only thing that our father had in his childhood, he actually had a middle-class childhood, and he drove off family into poverty. And we're like, why on earth would you do that? But the reason was, he grew up with a patriarchal family structure, which isn't bad in itself, but his father was in the Navy, and his mother was a 1950s housewife, the type that doesn't work, isn't educated, doesn't drive, doesn't do anything except look after a man. And that's all she ever wants to do, and she does it as best she can. And our father just grew up with that, seeing a woman look after his father and look after him. And when he grew up, he spent his entire life trying to recreate that, trying to get a woman to do for him what his mum did, basically, for his childhood. And he couldn't get it to work. And what he found was he was going through women, and he was actually married when he first met our mother, trying to make those circumstances work. But rather than finding out that women don't like to be controlled or dominated, and actually going, I'll adjust to women having freedom, every time it didn't work, he learned a new tactic to control a woman. So when he was with his previous wife, that we didn't know about until after the murders, his previous wife, he got her married, he met her very quickly, ratcheted through the process of commitment, and then she left. And he was like, well, how does a woman leave? And when he was still married, he met our mother, and the first thing he did was have a child with her, and that was me, within literally a month. He got pregnant, and then 9 months later on, I came. Because he learned that a child is the way to stop a woman from leaving. And the way that you isolate a woman, and the way you can control her financially, the way that you can do all of these things to her, makes her dependent on you. So our father drove our family to poverty. He was giving all of our money away. To people he didn't know, on the internet, he was disposing of it, he was wasting it, he was going on holidays by himself, just trivially disposing of money. And his children were like, what on earth is wrong with you? But actually, he was indirectly buying control of our mother. He took her from work so she could work, and then just disposing of money to the point where even if they divorced, there wasn't enough for her to start a new life. And at the time, we just saw these things as, as often people will comment on these sort of men, they're a bit creepy, they're a bit controlling, they're a bit jealous, they're a bit this, they're a bit that. But actually, coercive control as a mentality is incredibly deadly, and we didn't realise that control can lead to murder without any violence incrementing, and it commonly does. It was only after the murders of Mum and our sister Charlotte, we found out that in domestic homicides, a third of them have no history of violence at all. Nothing. Which seems really, really odd. You think, how does this go from nothing to murder? Well, the point is, it doesn't go from nothing to murder. It goes from increasing control to murder. And the escalation of control over the victims is constant. And actually murder, when you put it in the context of control, is the ultimate act of controlling someone's life. When they've disobeyed you enough, and you refuse to be disobeyed anymore, how do you stop them? You kill them. And actually, we'd always seen domestic abuse in a context of violence alone, and that made no sense to us. Our experiences made no sense to us. And it was only when we looked at domestic abuse through the context of trying to control someone that then made sense, and all our experiences fitted into that. And actually, unfortunately, the murderers that happen in domestic abuse are all male towards female, pretty much, and the men that are killed by the men, often the children killing the father, or something similar. And unfortunately, it is a male, domestic abuse can happen, male to female, all kinds of genders, but the really serious domestic abuse is almost entirely gendered. And that's when we realised that crime is all about entitlement. It's nothing to do with emotion, it's nothing to do with trauma. And people kept saying, the childhood. And we're like, well, we had an awful childhood, we never killed anyone, we don't intend to. And actually, we know in us the choices we've had to make every single day, not to be a bad person. But our Father chose every single day to make those choices to make him a bad person. And there's one quote that I really like, that a guy, I can't say his name at all, but he was in the Gulag in Soviet Russia, and he said, the line between good and evil lies between each person in their heart. And actually, good and evil isn't a thing that is out in the world. It's not there's this evil monster that we have to go and catch. Evil is a choice we make, and good is a choice we make every single day. And it's down to us to make that choice. Because it doesn't matter how traumatised you are, you will never hurt someone unless you feel that you're allowed to, or that you can, right? Because even if you're horribly traumatised, most people who've been depressed will know, you spend all day in bed, or you hurt yourself, or you might punch your wall. You don't hurt your family or people closest to you. You only hurt someone when you think that you can. And our Father felt that he could hurt us, but he didn't feel entitled to hurt our neighbours, or his boss, or anyone else. So crime is all about entitlement, and evil is all about entitlement. It's not about emotion, it's not about trauma, none of that. Although trauma can drive someone who's chosen to be evil, to be even more incredibly evil, it isn't the decision point that directs someone down that route. So Ryan and I do our best to help other people understand that, it's not childhoods and things like that make people horrible people. Unfortunately, it's their decisions, and it's the level of entitlement that they have. And as I was sharing when I told you the speech, after the murders of Mum and Charlotte, we saw where that entitlement comes from. We saw it in the media. We saw it the moment the murders had happened, because when our father killed our mum and our sister, we saw headlines and articles about a good man who'd always been caring, who killed his family. I'm like, who's this man? Who are you talking about? And it was our father. And one article said it was understandable that he killed mum and our sister because we were leaving him, how emasculated it must have been, how humiliating for a man when his whole family decided to abandon him. But the really strange thing was that in it all, there was a huge amount of sympathy for our father and his mental health. There was no sympathy at all for the 30 years we've been through, for the murders, for anything. And it showed us in that moment that men's feelings are given more weight in women's lives, and that was the moment that we saw this isn't a personal family problem, this isn't an individual problem, this is societal-wide, and the entitlement that feeds people like our father is everywhere. We all know Trump, we all know people like Boris Johnson, we all know all these people are everywhere, huge amounts of power. Misogyny is all over the place. It isn't something that was old-fashioned and is gone. It's very much in fashion. And we saw it in the media and we're like, where did he get all of this from? Well, he's got it from everywhere. And I think when people ask you about someone like our father, they say, what was his childhood like? It's the idea that emotion causes this stuff to happen, right? He must have had a traumatic childhood to create that emotion to cause it to happen. But it's not. It's about entitlement, and it's about society you live in, because he borrowed all that from the society he lived in. It wasn't his childhood that gave him these ideas. although he gathered some of it from his childhood, it was everywhere. And that's something that's really important for us, because we never understood it in the right way, and that was why we never saw it. And it's really important that people who are in our situation can see the danger of what it is and not trivialise it. And the other thing I think that Ryan and I have kind of been nose-dived into is the world of just like, trauma and mental health and stuff. And people are always like, how do you deal with this stuff? How do you manage it? And I think growing up, actually, we'd become resilient because it was the only thing we knew to do. We just kept learning to deal with what was happening. We just kept adapting. And there's a quote, actually, that Jeremy Corbyn wrote forward for our book, which is really nice of him. And he put in a quote from Angela Davis, which was about basically being fed up with accepting the things that you can't change and then changing the things that you can't accept. And growing up, we'd always accepted the things that we thought we couldn't change. We were resilient, right? We just adapted and survived. But we've learned that actually, resilience isn't the goal in life. Like, what we all have to learn to do is to actually change the stuff that's not right. And like, I guess feminists here, the sort of Labour group, you'll know, like, the personal is political, right? What you experience in your life isn't an individual thing. Rarely is it individual, is it you, is it something particular about you? Often, much of our lives are constructed for us before we're born, on a cultural level or a structural level. These things that we experience are often cultural things manifesting in our lives. What our father did to us was misogyny. Acted at our mother, and we were just pawns in his game. But that misogyny manifested down and resolved itself in our life. It wasn't just one bad man, one bad apple, and misogyny only in our father. It's everywhere, and it's just absorbed kind of into our lives. And when things like that happen, it can be sometimes easy to sort of bury yourself away and think, what a horrible world, it's picked on me. But it hasn't. What happened to us happens every week. Like 2 women killed every week in circumstances that our mum and our sister were killed in. And we realised that actually what happened to our family wasn't personal, it wasn't a personal family problem at all. It's actually something that is just ever present and something that we need to do something about. So Ryan and I have actually found what's really helpful for us to talk about it, turning our personal situation into something political, to try and help other people understand what they can do. And actually, domestic abuse, we didn't realise just how common it is. Again, we thought, even living with it, domestic abuse was old-fashioned, something that happened a long time ago, doesn't happen anymore, and it's all done. But actually, 1 in 4 women suffer it in their lifetime and continue to. And domestic abuse is just changing form. Like kids now, actually, the statistics say children suffer domestic abuse and abuse each other more than previous generations because they have more tools to do it. Digitally, all kinds of stuff. They can surveillance each other in ways that was never possible. So domestic abuse isn't going away, it's getting worse, and it's changing form. So what we really need to do is make sure we keep up to date with how it's carried out and why it's being carried out, so we can see it. Because a lot of us still think, and I did think, having lived with it, it was kind of fading away. It's on its way out. It's one of those old-fashioned things. It's just it. And unfortunately, it really isn't. And coercive control is key to understand domestic abuse. So once you understand domestic abuse and coercive control, you can see from its roots all around the many ways that it manifests. So I'll kind of share my story with you, and hopefully you guys can all feel comfortable to kind of ask me whatever you want. But this will take about 15 minutes. So on the 19th of July in 2016, our father shot and killed our mother Claire and our 19-year-old sister Charlotte in broad daylight, and he then committed suicide. The murders occurred in our hometown of Spalding, in the car park of the swimming pool. My brother Brian and I only survived the attack because we were both working abroad at the time of the murders. And just 5 days before, we'd broken our mother out of the family house, and we moved to a small rental house that was just 5 miles away. Our sister Charlotte was on holiday with a boyfriend at the time of the move, and she returned to the new house just 1 day before Mum and Charlotte were both killed. My brother Ryan and I had spent our entire lives studying, working and saving to give our mum and our sister the life they always deserved, only for our father to steal it from them. And in the aftermath of the murders, Ryan and I witnessed a media commentary which described our father as a nice guy who was always caring. And the public and the media might not have known that we'd been suffering decades of emotional and psychological torment at the hands of our father. But despite what our father had done, murdering our mother and our sister, it seemed that many still wished to believe that he was a good man somehow. And one report even stated that murders were understandable. And in every report that we read, there was speculation that the prospect of divorce was what drove our father to murder, that we were responsible for triggering him. And it became clear to Ryan and I, when we read those reports, that our society instinctively holds women accountable for men's actions. In fact, in the majority of reports, there were helplines for male mental health charities rather than domestic abuse charities, demonstrating, as I said, that our society gives greater significance to men's feelings than it does to women's lives. And we were embarrassed, quite frankly, by the low expectations held for men, that men could still be good men for even the most malicious actions. Yet Ryan and I believe that men can be and should be held accountable to more. So within days of the murders of Mum and Charlotte, we had to witness our murdering father eulogised in the national media, which chose his perspective over our mums and our sisters. We were forced to read, for example, of our father's suicide note, but it was a murder note to our mother and our sister. We were forced to hear passers-by commend our father's character, but to question our mums and our sisters' actions in the same breath, an apparent character assassination of the already assassinated. And we were forced to read a story which began when we escaped our father, and finished when he killed our mother and sister just 5 days later. But our story was 25 years long. In the subsequent police investigation after the murders, it was uncovered that our father had been searching online for reports of men who killed their families for months before he killed ours. And he would have seen the media providing these men with a public funeral and justifying their actions for them. In fact, our father used the justifications and rationalisations that he'd come across in the media to create his own murder note, which the media then reprinted from, further propagating the entitled beliefs which led our father to feel justified in killing our mother and our sister. But despite the man that our father was, growing up I'd never identified as a victim of domestic abuse, and I certainly didn't realise that our family was in any serious danger. I'd always interpreted our father's behaviours as unpleasant, as disrespectful and as aggressive, but they never seemed dangerous. They were often just controlling. I'd always interpreted our father's actions as our own personal family problem, which no one else could help us with. And our father constantly fed us the narrative that our experiences were just the normal ups and downs of family life, that we had no alternative. And as a child, this was all I'd ever known, because I had nothing else to compare it to. I'd never considered that to be controlled was to be abused. We'd always wanted to free Mum and Charlotte from our father, but it wasn't because we believed that he could or he would kill them. It was because none of us could live freely under his daily domination. But despite our father's controlling behaviour at home, Ryan, Charlotte and I were successful at school and later in our lives at sport, because we'd learned to keep our heads down. We'd learned to do everything required of us and more, and we never broke any rules. And our successes outside of the home simply reinforced the idea that we were living an ordinary life. We gave our father the benefit of the doubt because we'd assumed that he couldn't have hindered us that much. We'd assumed that his behaviour was unpleasant, but ultimately inconsequential. We were overachievers because we knew that we had to provide a life for each other that our father refused to provide for us. Our successes were simply indications of the relentless pressure on our lives. But despite the man that we endured at home, our father's behaviour seemed to be excessively friendly outside of our family. But our father was well practised at acting, because he refined his performance every single day to portray himself as the archetypical family man, relentlessly talking about how he cared for and protected his family. But any care or protection that our father gave was simply a means for him to maintain control. As we would learn after the murders, he never intended for us to be independent and to protect ourselves. Our father's financial control in particular kept our family poor so we could never survive away from him. He gambled and betted online, he'd gone on holidays by himself, and even gave our entire family savings away to someone online that he'd never met who claimed to be a student, needing help with his student loan. Yet our father never helped any of his own children. He decided entirely how the money was to be spent at home.
He took our mother's wages and rationed only the bare minimum back to her for essentials like groceries. Every receipt was tracked and every mile was accounted for. But our father would claim that it wasn't him controlling us and restricting our lives. We were simply poor. What would we expect? We just couldn't afford to do those things that we wanted. It was his boss's fault one day, or maybe the government's on another. So we learned that we couldn't afford the fuel to leave the house to do hobbies, so we cancelled them. We couldn't go out to see friends, so we stayed at home. And eventually it became too much hassle to go out at all. And our father even controlled our movements inside the house. He claimed we couldn't afford to heat any of in the rooms in the house, except conveniently just the living room, where we all had to sit within our father's gaze. If our mother was ever out of our father's sight, he'd rush around the house, bursting into the toilets if need be, to find out where she was. If we were ever away from him, he'd accuse us of conspiring and collaborating against him. And our father even managed to find ways to stop our mother from having friends over. When our mother did invite friends over for coffee, our father would simply follow them around the house and sit silently in the corner of whichever room they're in. Innocuous enough, but eventually our mother and her friends just became so uncomfortable it was easiest if no one ever came over again. Growing up, it was clear that our father wanted to control every aspect of our lives, but it was particularly our mothers that he was focusing on. He never permitted our mother any freedom outside of the house, and she wasn't allowed a smartphone, social media, or even access to the internet unmonitored. He wouldn't let us contact our mother unless we Skyped home through our father, so he could hear every word of our conversation. And he demanded to know all of our mother's activities. He'd often take time off work and turn up at her place of work at the supermarket to spy on her between the shelves, just to check she was where she claimed she was. But despite demanding to always be in control of our lives, when things didn't go to plan, our father claimed that he was the unfortunate victim of us. In our teenage years, our father was diagnosed with prostate cancer, but he went through the necessary procedures and the cancer was removed. But from that point on, he blamed stress for giving him cancer, and he blamed us for the stress. Even when the cancer was removed, he continued to blame us for giving him cancer. And only a couple of years later, our mother revealed to us at dinner now that she had cancer. And this was an opportunity for our father to launch into a tirade where he blamed all of us for stressing him out with the situation, potentially worsening his prostate cancer, which he no longer had. He screamed at us because none of us understood what it was like for him that his wife had cancer. And as we grew older, we came to believe that our father's behaviour was improving somewhat. But the truth was that we had normalised our father's behaviour, and we could no longer see it so clearly. Our father had successfully created a world where we had no option but to confine ourselves to his prison, otherwise known as our house. At times we felt like we were making choices, but they were only ever the choices that we were allowed to make. And as much as we would have wished for a better life growing up, our father had successfully trapped our family. Our mother also suffered from multiple sclerosis, and she couldn't work more than part-time. She earned at most only £6,000 a year, and she knew she could never support 3 children by herself, and her extended family was unable to support her. Therefore, as young boys, Ryan and I knew that we had to get our heads down, work hard at school and university, save up, and one day we could try and fund an escape. And eventually, after many years of hard work, in the middle of June 2016, Ryan and I had raised enough money to rent a place that Mum and Shark could escape to, and from where we could support them. In the middle of July in 2016, when our father left for work one day, Ryan and I, who had flown back the night before from Scotland and Holland where we worked, picked our mother up from work in a moving van. We headed over to the family house and we grabbed what little furniture we needed to populate the rental house before our father came back for lunch. We managed to get what we needed, and as we drove over to the new rental house, we thought that at last our lives lay before us. But it was only 5 days later when Ryan and I returned to work that we found out that our father had shot and killed Mum and Charlotte in the Spalding swimming pool car park. And when Ryan and I were cleaning the family house after the murders, we found that our father had been writing drafts of his murder note. He had in fact been planning to kill his entire family for weeks before he even started planning to leave him. And he was just updating his justification for killing us each time. We also found a to-do list that our father had produced in the days running up to the murders, and it was so coldly ordinary. It included buying a second-hand fridge he knew he'd only have for 2 days. He returned a leased car on time the day before the murders to avoid a late fee. And he diligently purchased a parking ticket 20 minutes before killing Mum, Charlotte and himself. Our father was functioning intentionally and rationally as he always had. Nothing had changed him. There was no emotional breakdown, no loss of control or no change in character on that day. And after the murders of Mum and Charlotte, the police investigation revealed to Ryan and I just how much our father had distorted our perspective growing up, and the level of invisible control he had upon us, which we'd never even seen. Firstly, we discovered that our father was married when he first met our mother, yet everyone in our family had been sworn to silence on this. It emerged that our father's previous wife wouldn't have children with him, and she simply left one day. And our father learned an important lesson that day. Not that women have and deserve independence, but that you can't easily control a woman without a child. So upon meeting our mother while they were still married, our father flattered and love-bombed our mother before quickly throwing away her contraceptive pills and insisting she was having his child. And I was then born. And our mother was then quickly rushed through the stages of commitment thereafter. The next key event in our lives was when our father moved our family to an isolated, run-down farmhouse when I was 3 years old, and neither of our parents worked there for a decade. We'd always been told by our father that we moved because of the discovery of my life-threatening nut allergy, when I'd eaten a nut accidentally and been rushed to hospital. In fact, the police investigation found it was already known I had a nut allergy at the age of 3. What had actually happened on that day, as reported by our mother's sister, was that our father had demanded that our mother move away from her work, her family and her friends to the country. On refusing, our father fed a peanut to me in front of my mother to demonstrate control over my life and to coerce her into obeying him. And this threat hung over our mother for 25 years, at which point it was being manifested when he killed Charlotte before killing our mother when she finally disobeyed him. Children were always just pawns to our father. We were just a means to get to our mother. So within 3 years of meeting our mother, our father had created dependency through children, isolated our mother by taking her to the countryside, and reduced her to poverty by taking her from the workforce. The perfect recipe to control our mother thereafter, and there wasn't a single bruise to be seen. And for us children, our father created a series of false narratives to explain the key events in our lives, so that we were never any the wiser of his true intentions. And obviously, since the murders, Ryan and I have had to reflect deeply on our lives. And it's become clear to us that men like our father, who kill, do so because they believe that they can. In fact, our father felt that he should in order to assert his masculine dominance over us once again. And the emotional language that we saw used in the media betrays the true motivations of men like our father who kill women and children. These men aren't provoked, and they don't snap, and they certainly don't lose it. Men like our father are calculated and cold-blooded in executing what they see as their entitlement over what was always theirs. And since the murders, we've continued to see that the media are often surprised at the true character of domestic murderers. But this is precisely because abusers control who they abuse. The abuser is often thought of someone who loses control of their emotions, but the truth is they demonstrate extreme levels of control over their intimate partners. As someone who's willing to control every aspect of your life is fundamentally willing to control whether you live or you die. And we've also seen that the media often portrays a dangerous outside world for women and children. A world full of perilous dark alleyways and malevolent strangers. But the true danger for women and children is at home, at the hands of their husbands and their fathers. Half of murdered women are killed by a partner, and this number is only 3% for men. Men like our father don't randomly kill the women closest to them. These women are specifically targeted because women are perceived as nothing more than male possessions to men like our father. And unfortunately, as our case showed, our society still sees male possession rights and the subsequent decisions these men often make on behalf of their family as more important than the rights of freedom for women and children. And after the murders, we were shocked to find out that domestic abuse accounts for a quarter of all murders in the UK. In fact, over 100 women are killed a year by intimate partners. And for comparison, it's taken conventional terrorists 10 years to kill this many people. We need to recognise domestic abuse isn't simply a side issue. The real terrorism in the UK is sex-based, not ethnic or religious, and it occurs in our homes, not in our streets. Women often suffer disproportionately from the most severe forms of domestic abuse. And as a society, we often don't notice when women are economic and social prisoners in their own homes. Our mother closely resembled the stereotype of a perfect mother, but she couldn't escape our home. And even when women do escape, their abusers often harass them and hunt them down. In fact, 3/4 of murdered, abused women are killed after they've left. The question then isn't why doesn't she leave, but why don't these men let their partners leave? And as we've learned, coercive control is present in the history of all domestic homicides, yet violence is completely absent in a third. Violence is just a means to gain control of someone, and it's often the clumsiest and the most obvious. And for this reason, many abusers, like our father, will restrain themselves to coercive control until their tactics no longer work, at which point their last resort is violence. In many cases, as we learn, this can be murder. And therefore we have to acknowledge the danger in masculine controlling behaviours, because if we only look for violence as we did, it will often be far too late. And our society's lack of understanding of domestic abuse currently leaves victimised and vulnerable women and children to flee their abusers. And it's women and children, like our mother and our sister, who have to pursue the lives of fugitives. And it's innocent women and children who often end up incarcerated within refuges. Meanwhile, perpetrators like our father remain at home with their freedom unimpaired, never challenged, and never having to question their own behaviours. And in fact, abusers rarely consider their behaviour abusive. Our father just saw his behaviour as the adoption and policing of gendered roles in the home, which to him is the way that things should be. In fact, to him, it was the way that things had always been. And the heavily gendered roles that our father enforced in our home used to exist in the public in the not too distant future, in the not too distant past. In fact, we were actually surprised to recognise that marital rape wasn't a crime until 1991. As equality has been pursued in public, men like our father continue to enforce their control in private, seeing nothing wrong with things as the way they used to be. And put simply, domestic abuse isn't an anomaly, it's more of a tradition. As the public law continued to develop more progressively, our father continued to enforce his own masculine law more aggressively behind our closed doors. Yet many didn't see it, and therefore are unable to see the scale of the problem. And as we've learned from our own experiences, domestic abuse isn't women's problem to mitigate, it's men's problem to prevent and to stop. And we need to shift the burden onto masculine culture to change, because as our story shows, we can't force women and children to resolve the issues themselves. Domestic abuse survivors have no shortage of strength, but unfortunately our strength in enduring the abusive behaviour is our liability. We learn to adapt when we should flee. Therefore, we can't treat domestic abuse and domestic homicide as personal family problems any longer. They're society-wide gender violence problems and need to be treated that way. We can't see behind closed doors, but what we can't see, we must learn to hear, which means that we all must start to speak about domestic abuse. Therefore, since the murders of Mum and Charlotte, my brother Ryan and I have dedicated ourselves to raising awareness of the coercive control that we suffered and never saw. And we recognise significant amounts of education required on coercive control, because despite living with it for 25 years, the first time that we heard of it was when we were sat in the police station, just 2 days after the murders, and we saw a poster which articulated our father's behaviour for those 3 decades exactly. Yet we aren't alone, because many only understand domestic abuse to be like bruises and broken bones. What did he do to you is often the immediate question asked. But that only understands one type of abuse, not the type of abuse that we suffered. That question ignores the type of abuse which is persistent, which is every minute of every day, and where each abuse blurs into the next, and no single significant incident stands out by itself. Coercive control is an abusive environment, as opposed to an abusive incident. Coercive control, as in our case, is murder with 1 million pinpricks over many, many years. Over our entire lives, our father had never been explicitly violent to us, but this was because he didn't need to be. He turned our home into a financial, psychological and emotional prison that we simply couldn't escape. And since we didn't understand coercive control, at first we couldn't understand how the murders of Mum and Charlotte had seemed to have come out of nowhere. We'd only understood domestic abuse to be about violence, but the violence all came at once. It was only when we understood domestic abuse to be about control, when we understood murder as the ultimate act of controlling someone, we were finally able to see what we'd been through. And with this perspective, we were able to see clearly that our father's actions had followed a trend of increasing control across our entire lives. And coercive control is best understood by considering not necessarily what is done to you, but by what is taken away from you. Because fundamentally, coercive control is a liberty crime, and it's much more analogous to hostage taking or kidnapping than it is to the accumulation of assaults. And as mentioned, it's often asked, why didn't she leave? And that question shows how little domestic abuse is understood. Because the abuse is not supposed to push you away. The entire purpose is to force you to stay. Because our father's behaviour made all of us, but particularly our mother, socio-economic hostages in our own home. We were slaves to our father's masculine insecurity. And as we've learned, we shouldn't treat domestic as a mitigating factor. Because if an abuser knows someone's every fear, their habits, their travel patterns, their work, their friends and their family, the abuser can leverage this information to destroy someone's life in the way that a stranger never could. The home, unfortunately, is a ready-made prison if someone wishes to use it so. And as we grew up, our father always had a justification for the way that he treated us, and he would often blame it on external problems or on us directly. Yet Mum and Charlotte had been through so much more suffering in their lives than our father ever had. And they showed Ryan and I that there was another way to respond. They chose to respond to love in the face of suffering. And they showed us that our father's behaviour wasn't understandable, as claimed in the media. Our father's behaviour was an active choice that he'd made for 3 decades leading up to that day. He chose to lay the burden of his existence upon his family. Mum and Charlotte became strengthened and more resilient in the face of their challenges, and it's from their bravery and strength that Ryan and I were forged.